Ahoy hoy, Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games, we like roguelikes, and we like the devices that bring them to us. Today we're looking at a device that helps us both play retro games and roguelikes, and it's the Gamesir X2 Bluetooth Controller for Android and iOS. And in today's video, we're going to do some gameplay testing and some general impressions of this controller strictly for use on iOS. There are a lot of good telescopic mobile phone controllers for Android, but not very much for iOS because of the way Apple handles their controller ecosystem. And I picked this controller up specifically so I can use it with my iPhone. So we're going to do a couple of things with this. We're going to do an unboxing. We're going to do some gameplay tests with both retro games and roguelikes. We're not going to do the typical can it play retro games, can it play roguelikes, because it can do both, but you're limited with what's available in Apple's App Store if you are going to use this controller on your iPhone, as I am. I'll go over some commendations and condemnations, and I'll give you my overall recommendation as to whether this is a good iPhone controller. There's a lot to unpack and go over here, so let's get started. So let's start with a general unboxing here. I got this controller on Amazon. Now, I paid $30 for mine on sale, but if you were to go on Amazon at time of recording, it retails for about $60, and I will include a link in the description if you are interested in buying this controller. Now let's dig in here. I had to disable the sound for this video because my dog was barking at time of recording, and I didn't want you to have to hear dog barking while I was taking the controller out of its box. But here it is. Comes in a very nice packaged box. I'll give you a little bit of a closer look here. And let's go ahead and open this bad boy up and see what's inside. Now, one of the biggest selling points for this controller for me was the fact that it actually comes in its own labeled carrying case, and it actually is a very nice case. Here's an accessories box. Let's take a quick look in here. You have your USB-C charging. You have your thumb pads. I'm actually going to put those on. Here's your USB-C port for charging. And if we look in this accessories box, we have a quick start guide with a QR code and a contact us. We have a nice Gamesir sticker. I actually really like their logo. Inspection card. And user manual. Now let's go ahead and take the controller out of its case here. I actually really like the feel of it. The plastic feels nice and sturdy. Feels like it's not going to break that easily. And this carrying case is actually very well made. I have very similar carrying cases for some of my retro devices and controllers, and this carrying case impressed me. Here's the controller itself. Those thumb pads are looking a little thin, so that's why they include the attachments. You have full shoulder buttons on both sides, R1, R2, L1, R2, and you have your A, B, X, Y buttons. They push in very nice. They're kind of close to the controller, which makes them pretty responsive. You have clickable L3 and R3 in the joysticks, and the D-pad looks sturdy. It looks like it can handle retro gaming. power and charging port on the bottom. And we'll just take a quick look at the back because it has some really comfortable grips, which would make this really good for long play sessions. Now, because this device works with both Android and iPhone, you need to put it in iOS mode. We do that by holding B and the power button. And the green light shows power, and you have this blinking purple light. If it's blinking purple, that means you are in iOS mode. However, it's blinking slowly, and it might not pair to your phone. So what you want to do is you want to hold the top two buttons, the G and the S button, until the unit powers off. And then we'll go ahead and power the unit on again, and that purple light is blinking quicker, indicating that it's ready to pair. So let's get into our iPhone, and let's go into our Bluetooth settings. And the reason that some of these newer controllers work with iPhones is because the manufacturers are tricking the iPhone into thinking that it's an Xbox wireless controller. So you are going to pair with Xbox wireless controller. Now, I have a very beefy case. It's one of those rugged cases. And this controller fits just fine, which is another point in the Gamesir X2's favor, because a lot of telescopic controllers like the Razer Kishi tell you to take the phone out of the case, and you don't have to do that with this one. So let's go ahead and get into some gameplay. Now, in my hunt for retro games, I actually had a hard time finding old retro games that were released on the App Store that had full controller support. But the Christian Whitehead Sonic the Hedgehog 1 app from Sega was one of those games that we could play with full controller support, and you could see it's running just fine here. I did have to cut this up a little bit because if you don't pay for these games, the ads are insanely intrusive and they pop up literally every 30 seconds. So I recommend that if you are interested in playing the old Sonic game on your iPhone, that you do pay the $2 to get the ad-free version. Otherwise, you're just going to get annoyed. But other than that, gameplay looks just fine, picture looks good, and the controller's working just fine. Here's the iOS version of Crazy Taxi. I had to turn the sound off for copyright purposes, even though I love the Offspring song that plays during this game. But you could see, controller seems to be responding. I'm just notoriously bad at Crazy Taxi. But we're looking pretty good. Controller's responsive. I don't see any signs of input lag, but there is about a good, I would say maybe half a second response time between the button push and the responsiveness. It's not enough to impact gameplay, especially in an old game like this. I'm also not sensitive to input lag, so to me this plays just fine. If you're noticing some significant input lag, please let me know in the comments. But from my personal experience, this controller is pretty responsive. Here is the iOS version of Chrono Trigger, and the reason I wanted to showcase this particular game is so that you could see the controller responsiveness in an RPG. I'm also not going to lie, any opportunity I have to listen to Chrono Trigger soundtrack, I will take. But you can see Chrono's running around just fine. If we get ourselves into a battle here, you can navigate the menus without any issue, and the controller, again, is very responsive. I'm going to just show off a little bit more gameplay of Chrono Trigger, just so you could see me navigating the menus and the battle screen, and you can see the controller is working just fine. Chrono Trigger is one of those extremely hard to find games, and it isn't as expensive on the App Store as it is to get a DS or an SNES copy of it. So this is a viable way to play this game if you plan on owning this controller. Here's another iOS controller compatible retro game, Knights of the Old Republic. Now, I struggled trying to figure out what the controller buttons did while playing this game, and I did have to use the touchscreen for a couple of things, like the pause and the play buttons. I couldn't figure out what those were mapped to on the controller, but menu navigation, camera controls, all seem to work just fine. So I'm going to let this footage play, and you could see where I struggled, and you could see what worked, and you can use your best judgment on whether this would be a good controller to play KOTOR on if you wanted to play KOTOR on your iPhone. And it's not a retro game or a roguelike, but I would be remiss if I didn't show off some gameplay of Genshin Impact. Now, this isn't a game that I play all that often, but if I have a few minutes to kill and I want to just do some exploring, this is typically my go-to if I don't have my Switch or another device with me. And the controller handles Genshin Impact very well. And this is where I really started to notice that there is a teeny tiny bit of input lag, but it did not affect my enjoyment of this game at all. You could see the moment from when I push the button to when the action actually occurs. There is a very, very brief delay, but it's not enough to ruin the gameplay experience. Again, I will let you see some gameplay of me playing with this controller, and you can use your best judgment. To cover our roguelikes, here is some gameplay of the iOS version of Dead Cells. I'm pretty sure I owe Dead Cells on at least 3 different devices, Android, iOS, and Switch. And again, a game like this is where you really start to notice that lag. Again, it didn't impact gameplay. I know I've said that a few times in this video, but I'm pretty sure with a game like Dead Cells, it was the difference between me getting hit and me not getting hit, which this is probably the only game that I would say is not great on this controller, of the ones that I tested. And we're just going to do one more gameplay test here. This is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Mega Battle on the PS4 using PS4 Remote Play. I mean, who can't pass up an opportunity to beat up putties and thwart Rita Repulsa in her schemes to take over Angel Grove and then the world? I still don't know to this day why Angel Grove had to be the target of aliens, but here we are. And this is just to show you that you can do remote play and you can do cloud services on iOS using this controller. Up until now, I've actually been struggling to find a decent device for remote play in handheld mode or for Stadia or cloud service gaming in handheld mode, and this controller so far has kind of ended my search. So let's wrap things up with some commendations and condemnations. So what I like about this, you do not need to remove your rugged case to use this controller. That is a major win for me. I've been looking for a controller like this for a long time, and I finally can have a telescopic controller without having to worry about if my phone's going to get damaged. The back grips are a nice touch. They are comfortable for longer gaming sessions. It works very well with compatible iOS apps that use the MFI standard. And one thing that I didn't show in this video that I actually really like is that because it's Bluetooth, you can use this as a separate controller. So I actually pair this with my iPad and get just as good functionality out of it that I would get from any other Bluetooth controller like an Xbox controller. Moving on to Condemnations, there is that slight input lag which didn't really bother me except in the case of Dead Cells, but it may bother you if you are more sensitive to it than I am. Because it is a Bluetooth controller, you do need to charge it, which means the battery will die at some point. However, I do have to say the battery life is pretty good. And the last condemnation would be the price. It is $60, which is kind of a premium price for a controller. However, if you're going to look at other controllers like the Backbone or the Razer Kishi, those are even more expensive. So what you get versus what you're paying is still not bad. But it's still not great. You're better off waiting for a sale like I did. And that'll wrap this up for this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I personally like this controller, but I hope this video helped you to make a decision as to whether or not using something like this on your iPhone would work for you. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please like and subscribe. Until the next one, bye for now, and don't stop believing.